Hello, universe, and any of its parallel realms. Be they naturally occurring timelines expanding from the same Big Bang, or just some sort of pocket dimension that exists because it was spawned off from some pre-existing universe. Whatever. Whenever or wherever you are viewing this from, welcome to my video talking about Ghostbusters. That's right, I'm here to talk about Ghostbusters. Sega Ghostbusters. Yup, I'm here to talk about Sega Ghostbusters because it's Sega Ghostbusters Day. The day within the universe of the Sega Ghostbusters video game that Ghostbusters took place on, though in the game it was probably taking place somewhere around 1985. Hey, it's Sega Ghostbusters Day! In the video game Ghostbusters for the Sega Genesis and Sega Mega Drive, there's an actual date. It's, February 4th. Or at least that's what the newspaper says when the newspaper reports on the activity of the Ghostbusters. So perhaps the events of the game take place the day before. That's a thought. Unless it's an evening edition that can report on what happened earlier in the day. But then again, the date on the paper never really changes, and the game does seem to take place over the period of at least 2 days, maybe more. So what would actually be Sega Ghostbusters Day? I don't know, but this is Sega Ghostbusters Day, because I'm going with the date it says in the Daily Sega News. Yeah, so for Sega Ghostbusters Day, I just gotta try and find something to talk about related to Ghostbusters, specifically Sega Ghostbusters. So we could take a look at perhaps some of the box art for those old games. Okay, taking a look at the box art for the Ghostbusters games, at least the Sega versions. The Sega Master System one has I kind of like the grid paper look. Makes it look sciencey and technical, very video game-like. The logo on it is the perfect representation of the Ghostbusters logo. And, simple, straight to the point. I like it. And if you play the game on a Japanese Sega Mark III or the Sega Mega Drive from Japan, it actually starts up showing you the Mark III logo, because a Sega Master System game like this is basically the same thing as a Sega Mark III game, just that Master System is the worldwide name for the console. The Japanese version was Sega Mark III, the follow-up to the Sega SG-1000. And of course, the game is very interesting, and the box and information on it does represent the game very well. And of course, the other games are well represented. The Japanese version of the Ghostbusters game, the one for the Sega Mega Drive, focuses more on pictures, but there's a pretty good description on the back of the North American Sega Genesis game. And of course, it is kind of tricky to get a good representation for these games due to the reflection when I try to take pictures of them with this camera, or I should say video clips with this camera. So perhaps the best way to show you what's in the games is to actually have a little clip from the games. And as said, the Ghostbusters are well represented both by the box art and the game for the Sega Master System. It's a pretty good game, and the Ghostbusters are doing things that one would expect if you're going to run a ghostbusting organization. The Sega Genesis game, you can tell that the Ghostbusters logo is off a little bit, changed a little bit since the first game, and the Sega Mega Drive version, the Japanese version, it looks pretty good, though it would look better, I think, if the entire Ghost had a black background behind him, since the overall background is black. And of course, if you're playing the Japanese version on the Japanese version of the console, you'll get Japanese language. The same thing happens if you put the North American version of the game in a Japanese console. Basically, the cartridge has both versions of the game on it, no matter which cartridge you have, just that the North American version only really wants to fit in a North American console. The Japanese version, well, it's actually easier to fit a North American cartridge in the Japanese system, but converters to fit either cartridge in any system can be found, and the cartridge detects the origins of, the national origin of the system that it's in. So if it detects it's an English language system, then you'll get the English language version of the game when you plug the cartridge into that system. And the same cartridge plugged into the Japanese system will give you the Japanese language. And although it's not quite what you think of when you think of Ghostbusters, the Sega Genesis and the Sega Mega Drive 16-bit version of Ghostbusters, it's a pretty good game. It's very stereotypical of what you'd expect of a game in the time it came from. Platform jumping and run and gun. I think history is a little bit 50-50 on the Commodore 64 version of the Ghostbusters game, though I personally love that game myself. And the Sega Master System game is also a great game like the Commodore 64 version, though history has looked pretty negatively upon the Nintendo Entertainment System version of that game. For good reason. That is the most screwed up version of the game. And it basically requires a turbo controller to finish the game, because the second last section of the game requires you to press a button for each step you take in the Zool building. Which I thought was it kind of followed the spirit of the movie at one point, where the characters talk about how exhausting it is to go up the stairs in the building. There's a line where they talk about, "Are we there yet? Oh, will we get this far? I'm going to throw up," sort of attitude. Just being exhausted by trying to get up the stairs with their proton packs. And so while those old games, I love them, especially the Sega Master System and Commodore 64 version of the game. And even when I pick up the Nintendo Entertainment System version of the game, I have fun with it. Oh, you're not going to get all the way through if you don't have a turbo controller hooked up to the system. The Sega Genesis game, I like it about on par with the Sega Master System game, though a lot of people look at that one as the really great old Ghostbusters game. Because it gave people what they wanted for the time. The time period was dominated by platform jumping games as well as often run and gun games. Like Mega Man, he's a platform jumper, and he also blasts things with a blaster. And that's basically what Ghostbusters was, a little bit more of an agile Mega Man. Because the gameplay in it actually is more agile and free than Mega Man. You can actually shoot in multiple directions. And not that I'm putting down Mega Man. I actually really like Mega Man. So many people, what they think of in a 16-bit video game, Ghostbusters on the Sega Genesis is exactly what they would have wanted. Now, personally, I felt the Sega Master System version was more true to the spirit of Ghostbusters, but I do really like Ghostbusters on the Sega Genesis. It's a great game, has a good story, especially for a very stereotypically 16-bit video game, and really is a good game. And while it would be surpassed by the Ghostbusters game on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 and personal computer, that game really did give you the Ghostbusters feel of what it would be like to play as a Ghostbuster doing Ghostbusters things in a Ghostbusters video game. The later video game on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 that functions as a sequel to the Ghostbusters movies and the series in general. There is a game in between Ghostbusters on the Sega Genesis and the more recent Ghostbusters, the video game, that kind of splits the difference. A little bit more realistic than a stereotypical 16-bit platform jumper, but still more of a stereotypical 16-bit game than the more realistic Ghostbusters the video game on the Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 or the personal computer equivalent. And that would actually be Extreme Ghostbusters for the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. It is a platform jumper, like the old Sega Genesis games. The characters are more realistic proportioned. Excuse me, a little bit more realistic proportioned, like the newer game. Time, the Ghostbusters weapons work more like you'd expect a Ghostbuster weapon to work, such as Eduardo's proton pack shoots a continuous beam. So just like Ghostbusters on the Sega Master System and the newer Ghostbusters the video game, this game gives you kind of a more realistic look to the Ghostbusters equipment, or at least a more Ghostbusters appropriate version of the Ghostbusters equipment, because you're not mostly just shooting pulses. Though if you play as Kylie Griffin, she does shoot pulses instead of a steady beam. In Extreme Ghostbusters, which was a sequel or follow-up to the Real Ghostbusters animated series, which had excellent writing just like the syndicated season of the Real Ghostbusters. Excuse me. Kylie Griffin had a smaller proton gun than the other Ghostbusters. Kylie was a little bit shorter than the other characters, but I think the main reason why she had the smaller proton pack is she was the one that carried the trap. In Extreme Ghostbusters, they had a upgraded trap that was a lot bigger and heavier than the traditional ghost trap. And as such, it was almost proton pack size, and she would carry that on her back. So her proton pack was a smaller version. The gameplay reflects that in the fact that her proton pack shoots rapid pulses of, I guess, proton energy, but it's not as powerful as the full-size energy beam, or proton stream. But as a result, where she's carrying a lighter equipment, she can jump higher and move faster than Eduardo in the game. Well, Eduardo, if I can pronounce things, Eduardo, he has the full-size proton pack. He doesn't jump quite as high or move quite as fast, but his proton stream is more continuous and like it's a steady stream, and it seems to do more damage. Which is kind of an interesting way to play the game, and you can switch back and forth between characters. If you need to make a jump that you might not be able to do as Eduardo, then you use Kylie Griffin. And if you're going to be overwhelmed by ghosts that Kylie Griffin's proton blaster might not be able to take out, you can switch back to Eduardo. And plus Kylie Griffin, she's carrying the ghost trap, which really probably should weigh her down as much as a proton pack, even though it doesn't in this game. She's carrying a ghost Mousetrap, so you can use that as a weapon in the game as well, too. They both have their own special abilities. Which is pretty cool, switching back and forth between those two characters. And part of the story is the other two Ghostbusters have gone missing. And hopefully we'll find them. There's even a part in the game where you drive Ecto-1. Which actually plays pretty good once you realize what to do. The main problem with it is you basically are driving straight to your location, so it's not really a problem. Though I remember playing it at one point and thinking, wait, do I keep going straight, or was I supposed to stop here? But no, you keep going until you get to the... It's pretty straightforward. It's just that you're not quite sure if you should stop somewhere, because as you continue along, your PKE meter indicates that there's more and more psychokinetic activity going on. And that makes you think, wait, the PKE meter is triggering. Should I stop here or keep going? I actually don't have the instructions for the game, unfortunately. When it was new in stores, I did not see it, and I had to buy it used. And I have a used copy of it, but unfortunately it didn't come with the box or the manual. In fact, I keep it in the case for my Nintendo DS version of Ghostbusters. The Nintendo DS version of Ghostbusters, those old DS games, the case actually has a part for the DS card. Then above it there's another place where you can fit Game Boy Advance cartridges into the case. So that was actually kind of cool. So you can fit your stray Game Boy Advance games into the case that your Nintendo DS games are. And of course, one Ghostbusters game can go next to the other one if I don't have the case for one of them. Anyway, that's enough talking about Ghostbusters. Happy Ghostbusters Day. Happy Sega Ghostbusters Day. Alright, so that's my Sega Ghostbusters Day vlog for 2017. Feel free to check out some more of my videos, including a recent Halloween video where Kylie Griffin, in a sexy witch's costume, introduces us to a toy. No, not that toy. No, it's not that type of video, not that type of toy. Anyway, you can feel free to check out that video, or many of the other videos that I've done. There's plenty more out there. Many times I've talked about Ghostbusters and other subjects like Star Trek and Sonic the Hedgehog and Phantasy Star.